A case in point for a fairly expensive and invasive technology, which I'm sure there could be a lot of discussion about, but in fact, if you look at a new application for a left ventricular assist device, this is about a decade old at this point, for advanced heart failure. It's an expensive, morbid intervention for a life-threatening illness, but what we found was that using this assist device increased the survival of patients by about twofold, quite substantial. That said, obviously, lots of people still die. However, what really isn't clear, unless you actually take a look at this, and this is really only in the context of this first randomized trial, this was the first randomized trial of this type of technology, was actually if you compare, do I have it? Yeah. If you compare the outcomes for patients who are enrolled in the first half of the trial with the outcomes, and these are only patients who were implanted with the device. If you compare them to the patients who were implanted in the second half of the trial, even within that relatively short time frame of this clinical trial in a narrow number of clinical centers with an extremely experienced number of clinicians implanting them, there was a statistically significant improvement in terms of outcomes. And frankly, it was not only, when you actually looked even more granularly, it was not only the surgical technique, it was a substantial learning curve in terms of the entire clinical team and even among hospitals as well. So adoption really is just the beginning of an ongoing extensive innovation and improvement process. Patient selection improves over time. It evolves. For instance, for the LVAD story, actually the patient population was refined. If anything, it was a little bit too broad early on, which clearly impacted outcomes. It's gotten narrower and outcomes have improved. If you look at something incredibly common, like bypass surgery, the number of patients who have bypass surgery at this point in time, who actually would meet the criteria for any of the evidence, and there were a couple of decades worth of evidence collected about 30 years ago. So any of the patients who would meet those criteria, at this point is about 5%. So incredibly wide adoption, and frankly, we really don't know if that's appropriate. In addition, because of improving improvements in terms of the medical management strategies, that actually feeds back to then improvements in the devices as well. And again, that has profound impacts in terms of longer-term outcomes and in terms of sort of downstream outcomes. So in any case, devices in particular do pose these unique challenges around when and how to look at effectiveness. Because of the iterative improvements in terms of the technology themselves and their applications, there really are, as far as we are concerned, fairly strong arguments for actually perhaps moving that effectiveness research farther downstream rather than earlier in the approval process, because in fact, if you were to be evaluating a number of these types of technologies earlier in the evaluation process, frankly, a number of them would actually have been shelved. It does seem that this, because if one were to accept this argument, that downstream adoption for rigorous evaluation of effectiveness might be an appropriate venue. It does seem to be potentially an ideal opportunity for public-private partnerships in terms of funding them. And there are, at this point, emerging a handful of these types of public-private projects that are ongoing. The Intermax registry, again, is one. It's in fact it's a registry, however. That answers part of the story. It's certainly not going to answer all of it, but I think that it is the beginning, and there's a long way to go. Thank you.